Welcome to On Fire for Life. I'm Temple Hayes. It's a pleasure to have you on the show and years of commitment and support. We really appreciate you and your engagement with us. Today, we're fortunate that we have Connie McReynolds. She's going to be talking about her new book, but more important, she's going to be talking about the body of life work that she's been doing for years and years and years. And now the spotlight is upon her. So we are part of the team that are supporting her in a global work and thrilled for the work that she's doing. I would like to say we love comments, either live time or later time. Please leave your comments, ask questions. We like your engagement. We like to know what interests you. And we're just very committed to this being a show that benefits all of us, not just me and Connie, because we talk all the time. So, Connie, thank you and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Temple, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, I was really excited when I read about you and researched you, and that you have such a connection to children.
Mm.
And I am a real advocate for children and what they endure, what they don't endure. My saying is that I wish that we would start from the ground up and just redo education altogether. A new start, a brand new day. In that, we put so much energy on the SAT
Mm.
and how you pass that, and the SAT ought to be the soul that's activating truth, the
Yes.
soul that's activating truth of the human being, right? But
Mhm.
anyway, that's just my small sense on it. But let's hear. I want to know, how did you get in this work of all the things you could do and be, and you could be in Hollywood, you could be in filmmaking, you could be a singer, you could be on American Idol, and you decided to tune into this line of work. How did you get there?
Well, things always go back to your childhood, don't they? So influences.
Help us, yes.
Yes, it always. When we
Hmm.
look too far, dig a little deep, we find that it goes way back. And certainly mine does. As I was writing the book, the stories started coming back to my mind. My mother taught second grade for 32 years in the same classroom, in the same town. And I joke a little bit about, I think I grew up in second grade.
You're probably right, though, right?
So, because, I was there in the morning, I was there after school and all the years. So she started back teaching when I went to kindergarten in the same school. And of course, I graduated high school from there, and she taught for another 30 years after that, or 20 some years after that. And really, my aunt, so it kind of comes from multiple lines. My aunt was the dean of a college of education in a university in the Midwest, and uncle was a professor. So I think I kind of came naturally to some of the teaching components. My mother was a very much an activist and in building, I guess you would call employee rights. So she organized and helped teachers get better pay. And she once told me she thought she probably ruined me for life from teaching with all the drama that she had lived through in her career, but that she'd always thought I would be a good teacher. And so I
Mm.
thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Thank you for that. And I did teach. I was at a university for 25 years.
What
And that
what state, Connie? What?
in two different states. So
Okay.
I was in Ohio for 10 years. And I must confess, the weather and I weren't compatible. So after 10 years of that, I jokingly told my dean one day, I said, just so you know, my next move will be based on latitude. And
Mm.
so I literally moved to the Southwest where it was sunny and warm, and that's where I've been for 15 years. But it was 25 years in academia of teaching. And
Yeah.
so part of that, though, was kind of bookended with what I did before I came to teaching, which was be a real rehabilitation counselor. And
Mm.
so I had done that work for 7 years at a state agency. And that really was the honing or kind of the awareness of the connection with counseling and with um, being in service to people, helping them find their way through difficult times. And that's what rehabilitation counseling was really all about. And so that became deeply infused into, I guess you could say, my blood. And
Mhm.
then attained my doctorate degree in rehabilitation psychology. And that foundation then led to the ability to do some research because I learned those tools along the way. I would consider myself first a researcher. I consider myself first a clinician, a psychologist, and an interested person in helping try to solve the difficulties that people are finding themselves in. And
Mhm.
part of that difficulty is really with children and finding their way through school. My mother was quite innovative in her day. She had decided decades before computers came along that children should know how to type. And so she had
Mm.
somehow acquired all these little IBM Selectric typewriters, had them in her second grade classroom, and started teaching these children how to type, and they could learn it. And so there was that piece going on, just kind of always thinking outside the box a little bit. And I think that came in my DNA because
Mhm.
that's really what happened when I was recruited out to Southern California. Part of that task was to build an assessment center, and part of that then evolved into understanding what this process is that I've been doing now for nearly 15 years, which is really uncovering what's going on, I believe, with children who are struggling to learn and looking at the labels. And so part of what I came to early on in my career is that these labels don't really help us a whole lot. They may help
Mhm.
a little bit, but they don't tell us a thing about who the person is. And that's what I always brought to my classroom is that you
Mm.
may have people walking with diagnoses, but don't stop there because
Yeah.
that's only the beginning. That's just what getting them in the door. That doesn't tell you anything about who or what this person is or what they're struggling with in life. And that's really the essence that I brought to this project 15 years ago is that children were coming in labeled with ADHD. They were coming in labeled with learning disabilities, with autism, with oppositional defiant disorder, which is one of my least favorite diagnoses of children. And so nothing was working for these
Mm.
children and for their parents. And that's where it all began, is that it wasn't working.
Well, it sounds like your mother had a tremendous impact on you of being innovative and thinking
Mhm.
out of the box. As you were saying that, I think now of my classmates that were making fun of us because we were taking typing because the teacher kept telling us that it was important. And now
Mhm.
here we are, we just type, 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 and it's like just keep laughing because we can type on this computer, we can because we have the skills. But it
Right.
sounds like you picked up a lot of, what your mother was, what she modeled to you is to think
Mhm.
outside the box, and
Mhm.
good for you because we certainly need that. And I just feel like spiritually that's one reason, and not that kids have to come into the world to be the worker, but I
Mhm.
think that there's such a, I don't know what it is, misperception, something's missing as far as children come into the world bright light, more often more evolved than the people that they're coming behind,
Mhm.
right? And like
Yeah.
you said, then we throw all these labels on them, or we tell them that they're gonna be this way or that way. I've laughed in many a talks I've given, and I've said, I was like a kid and I sneezed a few times and I had a cold, and "You're gonna have asthma like your grandmother." And then, I had stomach cramps. "You're gonna have to have a hysterectomy like your aunt," and I'm
Mhm.
12, like
Right.
you get all this data, and
Mhm.
very few people at that level have the freedom or the permission or the rebel. Me, I
Yes.
had the rebel. I became an original thinker later, but I started out as a rebel going, "No, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna have that." But you're right, the labels and
Mhm.
your book, I love the cover on your book,
Oh, thank you.
"Solving the ADHD Riddle: The Real Cause and Lasting Solutions to Your Child's Struggle to Learn." I remember my partner saying to me, many years ago, "Oh, I'm ADHD. Oh, I left my credit card on the gas tank in the car." because I'm ADHD. I went, "You're sleep deprived."
Hmm. Hmm.
Anyway, back to you.
No, it's so true, though.
It
It's
is like, where's
absolutely.
our common sense?
Mhm,
What happened?
mhm, mhm.
Where did our common sense go? But anyway.
Oh, I know. And really, that's kind of the heart of the book, which was that you just tapped into, which is what are we doing?
Mhm. Right.
What are we doing here? Because when I started asking myself with children and parents and adults, and I work with people, the youngest three, the oldest is 90. I actually have this system in a retirement center out
Mm.
here in Southern California. So
What
age isn't.
part? What part?
Um, I'm between LA and Palm Springs area.
Okay. I'm in
Hmm.
Santa Barbara.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I'm up, I've got my clinics kind of up and down the 10 out here. So,
Okay.
um, so what I started recognizing is what people were walking in the door with and the traditional assessments, the traditional interventions, things just for some reason weren't matching up. Things
Mm,
weren't working for people. They weren't working for adults. It wasn't working for the children, it wasn't working for the parents, it wasn't working for the teachers. And it seemed to me like if it isn't working for anyone, at least the ones I'm seeing,
mm,
then are we even in the right ballpark here? Do we even know what we're dealing with? Because it would seem like, with all that's gone along with all of these interventions over these decades that we've been trying to help people, if it isn't making a lasting difference, in other words, you get off the treatments, you can't follow the treatments, or something happens with the treatments, and we're back to square one, then to me that begs the question, what's happening here? And
mhm,
that's really where I started. And we have this great assessment that was developed that goes along with our system. And when I started peeling it back, and I will be honest, it took about 5 years of this work to really try and understand what I was seeing. And then to have, I guess you could say, the faith
right,
in believing that what I was seeing was true. And so part of it was really delving into some of the research. It's like, well, there has to be something about this in the literature. I was
mhm,
absolutely convinced I was going to find something in the literature. And before I published the first article in 2018, I spent 2 full years doing lit search. I did it myself. I didn't have someone doing it for me because I needed to trust that what I'm finding, I had scoured the literature. It wasn't just a
sure,
cursory review of this because I just kept believing that, well, there must have been someone writing about this. Someone had to have uncovered this. This can't be new news. This can't be new information. And I'm not sure it's completely new, but I think it's a different understanding of what we've been looking at, is what
mhm,
I'm really trying to drive, which is a different narrative about what we're looking at. And part of that certainly has been that the goal of most of these interventions up until this time has been to get rid of behaviors. So we identify children or adults who have these behaviors that we don't want. And for children in a classroom, my mother would talk about a little boy sometimes that she would have. And she said she would look up and he'd be under his desk trying to do his work. She'd look up again, he was on the side of his desk. He was anywhere except in his chair to do his work. And so trying to corral that, of course, wasn't going to happen because now we understand part of what that was. But,
right.
she did the best that she could under the
Of
circumstances.
course, and they were and that was a time that, your mom was rare.
Mhm.
"Oh, you told me what to do. You've told me in my educational conventions, this is how I'm supposed to do it, and this is what I do." We are, fortunately, we have other people that go, "I keep seeing this repetitive. What is going on here?"
Mhm.
Marilyn is asking us, a question. She's asking you a question,
Okay.
and then, of course, there's me, but how have you adjusted your treatments based on the generations?
Mhm. Well, I think that's a really great question because we're a technology driven
Mhm.
world these
Yes,
days. And we
yes.
actually use technology to help train the brain. And it's a non-invasive approach, which means we aren't administering any electrical shocks to the
Yeah.
brain.
Yep.
I
Yep.
often go out on presentations. Some people will say, "Well, are you going to shock me when you're doing this?" And I said, "Well, no, we're not going to, but your results might be shocking when you
Yes. Good,
accomplish
good
what."
answer. Good answer. Yes.
So we use technology. We use sensors. You can think of neurofeedback. I'll introduce that word here, neurofeedback.
Hmm.
You can think of it similar to biofeedback, which is kind of a cousin to. It's a second generation, is how I really describe it. Biofeedback is what came about decades ago,
Hmm.
where we learned that we could, by having biological information about our heart rate, our respiration, as we gained that knowledge and feedback, our biological feedback, we learned we could actually affect our heart rate. We could affect our respiration. So we felt more empowered because we suddenly had biological feedback, which became shortened to the word biofeedback.
Hmm.
Neurofeedback, neuro has to do with the brain. It's the same concept. You're getting feedback about how your brain's working. And how cool is this? Because we use a little sensor that goes on the scalp and it's literally able to read your brain waves from inside your brain, the same as we can read your pulse from outside your body, or the same as we can use an EKG that you go to your doctor to get data about. It's all a one way system. So there's nothing that comes back to the person. And we use what I call low impact video games. Now, there are high impact things out there, and I've written about that some in the book as well, and some of the cautionary tales around these high impact video games. But we develop a training plan based on the assessment data. So, the assessment data, the beauty is we get that in 20 minutes, and I give that to the parents or to the adult, and oftentimes they are so amazed that it describes their life so succinctly and so accurately that they're at a loss for words. Parents are sometimes deeply relieved about that. So we use that assessment data. We pair that up with a training program that's created just for each person. And so
Hmm.
the training program is like a gym for your brain. And you come in for 30-minute sessions 2 or 3 times a week. We do 10 hours of that and then we reassess. And the beauty is what you are learning how to do. First of all, you run the computer with your brain. So the kiddos jump on board with that because they think that's pretty darn cool.
Oh, yeah.
When they get to do that and they're going, what? And then that shifts everything for them because not only are they feeling more self empowered, because they're seeing their brain work and actually function and they're able to accomplish goals, whereas many of these children struggle to have those kinds of accomplishments in their life and
Hmm.
successes. So this is success driven. And that's what makes it work because we like success and children like to win their games. And so by consistently participating, they're able to learn, they're able to train their own brain based on the interventions that we provide. And it's so empowering for children. It's
Yeah.
very empowering for adults who've struggled their whole lives as well.
Must be
So,
very exciting for you to see the shifts that happen. I
mhm,
know, in my own work now, many a parent has come to me through the years and said, "Well, my child was just Tom. We'll just use Tom.
mhm,
Was just diagnosed, and he's autistic."
mhm,
And would say, I am certainly not a medical professional. If I were you, I would I would initially stay away from the labels
mhm.
because I think you need a whole lot more data, and I think you need to research. And it is a joy to know now you can be in that list. You need to work with you, but it's like with the first early on assessment, often a child gets labeled,
Yes.
and it's like you were saying in the very beginning of our time together, it's like getting them out of that label then, because if what is it they say, if see the child you want to see and that's who they will be, and with the labels, and it's like, and so I would say, from the wisdom that I have and the life that I have, and a recovering alcoholic of 36 years, what I would say is, what's the diet? What's the environment? Are they
Mhm,
ever going outside? You know, I mean, let's look at some key components that are essential to well-being,
mhm.
and then let's talk about the label, you know what I mean? And,
Ye
it fascinates me how a child gets labeled, and often if they're not supported to live outside of that aquarium, they just that's what they become,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, it's so interesting you bring that up because that's again, I wax back on my mother, and she was
Mhm,
always reluctant to put something specific like that in a child's file
mhm,
because she said, "This will follow this child all the way through every grade, and the teachers will read this and make assumptions
yep,
about this child all the way through before they even get to know the child."
yep,
And so there you go. So this child is misbehaving in first grade. What
mhm,
first grader isn't likely to misbehave?
right, right,
We're talking 5 and 6-year-olds here.
right.
They're not supposed to be able to sit in their chair for 4 hours at a time.
Yep. ADHD is another way that they get labeled so quickly because they can't pay attention. It's like,
Mhm,
and I'm like you, I have a passion about it from growing up, you know. But you know, you go, well, I felt like I was always in second grade. I felt like I was always in people's drama, growing up. And my
mhm,
mother did have those electric, not pretty, let me tell you.
mhm, mhm,
But that being because they said she was depressed, but she was just in an unhappy marriage, because who could say that in a little small town? Anyway, I'm not trying
mhm,
to get off subject here, but I'm just saying that I was given sugar toast,
mhm. Oh, yeah.
white toast, layered with butter, top it white sugar, and then they'd send me to first grade and wonder why I acted up. It's like it's just crazy.
Mhm. Well, things we didn't know, but I can tell
Right.
you I'm still having some of those conversations in today's world,
I'm sure.
because one of those intake questions is about dietary restrictions, and that's really
Mhm.
kinda how I get at it without asking them directly. It's like, dietary restrictions, allergies, and we kinda come at it from this angle, so I can hear maybe, what have they been doing? And so some, "Oh, we don't do red dye, whatever it is," or, "We're off sugar now because we figured this one out."
Right.
And others will say, "Oh, no, everything's good." And it's like, okay, okay, it helps me really understand the framework in which this child or the adult is actually living because it does matter. All of that matters
Mhm.
in helping people live their best life. And that's really what the mission of everything is that I'm about. And when I started my company 3.5, 4 years ago, that was after almost a decade of doing this work at a university. And the mission really is always about helping people improve their quality of life, and that's just the bottom line. At the end of the day, have we accomplished that in our clinics? At the end of the day, has that have what I done has that made some kind of a difference in someone's life here, so things are better for them?
Mhm.
And that's what the book is about. And I wasn't going to put that out until I had a way to really deliver the services to people. And so
Right.
we can do that to people kind of wherever they are now. And that's the beauty of what we do. And I guess one of the pluses of the pandemic, I keep trying to find those in there,
Right.
but it did help technology really boost its skill level. So you and I are sitting here on Zoom, and maybe 5 years ago we wouldn't have thought that to be, such a viable option as it is now. Being able to be on these calls and whatever mechanism we're using, whether it's Zoom or a dozen other platforms,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely, that we did get a lot of good from that. Well, to take your, neurofeedback, it's a quiz. Do you call it a quiz or
An assessment.
assessment an
Mhm,
assessment?
mhm.
Um, do they purchase the book in order to do that?
Well, there's a free brief one on my
Okay,
website, so that's really where a person can
okay.
start. The link to the book is also there on the website through
Mhm,
Amazon. And then that brief assessment was really designed for people to just do initial screening. It's like, well, am I in this pool or am I not in this pool? Kind
mhm.
of thing. Am I heading in the right direction here before I invest? 10 or 20 bucks in a book. And so then in the book, what you get there are case studies, and they're all actual people I have worked with over the years. Their names obviously have been changed, some of the details have been changed.
Sure.
And then at the end of two of the chapters, the one specifically about auditory processing difficulties, which isn't about your hearing, and one with about visual processing problems, which isn't about your vision, although those two things should be checked
Mhm.
just to make
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
There are extensive checklists there that parents or teachers or caregivers, or adults. I've had adults using it because this book, even though it was really targeted toward children, because I wanted to start this conversation, you opened with educational and overhauling it, and that is my deep goal in
Mhm.
overhauling our educational system and how we work with these children. That was the purpose of this, is to start changing this narrative and start changing the direction in how this is handled. So I don't know if I answered the question. So if I didn't get there, let me know and I'll come back around to it.
No, you did answer the question, and the book is Solving the ADHD Riddle: The Real Cause and Lasting Solutions to Your Child's Struggle to Learn. Those of you that are tuning in, you can see it in the comments section. You can see that we're on ConnieMcReynolds.com, her website, and you can access that, and you can also find it on our social pages. You know what I'm going to say is this is vital. It 15, 20 bucks, you spend that, driving down the street to buy avocados, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
It's like it's a necessary. There's things in our life that are just a necessary investment, especially if we're ever going to be around people. If
Mm-hmm.
we're going to live in a cave all alone and have our food delivered, that's one thing, but and we're choosing that. But for us to interact with children, people. I mean, that's something I realized being on the speaking circuit years ago. Let me be around kids. I didn't have my own, but I've been exposed or been part of a community to influence many. And I needed to know things that people like you had researched that you knew that you could give me the fast track,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
you can help me understand so that I won't keep repeating the patterns. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's an investment, and it's a crucial, cheap investment. Excuse me,
That's
because
right.
it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, what else can you do? Those 15, 20 bucks that you can even remember that you did again, like,
Mhm.
have a meal,
Yeah.
or whatever. And in Southern California, I don't even know if we can do that for that price.
Not crazy.
Unless a friend invites you over and that's the cost of
Right.
the flowers. But,
Yeah.
it's just so I can't say enough about it because we just keep repeating in generations where and we need to stop and take a breath and realize that there was the sayings of what was that 15 years ago, the rainbow children and the
Mm-hmm.
crystal children. And I have a goddaughter. She's tuning in right now, actually. Her name is Miracle, and she is a miracle. But we have had to learn and jump ahead of her, and this is the backwards way. And you can slap my hand if I'm incorrect, Connie, really. But to me, the backwards way is my parents went, you're going to do what I didn't get a chance to do, whether or not I even wanted the chance to do it, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to do it the way I tell you to, even though I don't really know that I'm happy with what's happening either, but this is what you're going to do. Whereas the real way, and this is why I'm grateful for the years that I was exposed to unity and thought leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or just teaching basic self esteem, right?
Right.
Is
Right.
to go, what do you have to offer? What do
Mm-hmm.
you think? Tell me what you feel, instead of just downloading the same data in a very dated system. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like you, I have lots of passion about it. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
have the credentials by your name, and rightfully so, and it's necessary that you do. But on the other hand, there's parents and grandparents that it's never too late for
Right.
them to learn this stuff. Something as simple as when you develop a child to be codependent, "Oh, honey, that was so nice. You make me so proud. Let's start codependency early on, huh?"
Mhm.
So they can spend their lives making other people proud. What
Right.
about because you feel good about yourself, right?
Mhm. That's right.
Anyway, you can tell I get all, "Well, this show is on fire for life. I need a little."
Well, I think it so aligns with the goal
Yes,
of where I feel like I want to go, certainly, but where I really want education to go, where I want society to go. I mean, I'm talking an overhaul here.
yes, yes.
I'm talking an overhaul because we are not catching these children when we should be catching them and giving them what they need when they first need it. And what happens when we miss the boat is that these children go on and they struggle year after year after year. They may skate by, they may not skate by. The
Mhm,
consequences are monumental in our society. Our jails are filled with children who didn't do well in school. And the question is, why
mm,
not?
right.
Why not?
Why not?
Why didn't they succeed? What happened? We're always so quick to, and there's nothing wrong with celebrating everyone who's doing great. There's nothing wrong with that. But one of the things I thought about as I was going through my graduate program, in science, and when you're doing, and I'm not a big scientist, I'm not a big researcher kind of person. I can pull it together when I have to and know where my resources are to get it done. But what about these outliers? It always seemed to me the outlier was the far more interesting data point in any data set than trying to just squeeze everybody into where you wanted it to go. And that's really where I started thinking about these children. It's like, are these children really outliers in our educational system? And if so, why? And I was so curious about, why are they the outliers? Why is this not working for them? What is happening? What is going on that then causes these children to start doubting themselves? They start this negative self-talk, and I have seen this in 6-year-olds
Mhm.
saying that they're not smart. I'm not smart enough to do this. And this is not where we need to be.
No.
We need to be in a very different place, but everyone involved with that child needs to understand that the behaviors are language, that it's something this child's trying to tell you, that a child cannot walk into you and say, "Mom, my auditory vigilance is off today. I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to repeat what you just said because I missed it."
Right. Alright. Yeah. It's our responsibility. We
Yes.
need to like you said, we need to have the expanded knowledge, in
Mhm.
order to really work with them and to listen beyond the listening,
Yes.
you
And
know?
when we can get away from thinking we have to dial down the behaviors. Now, to be fair, my mom taught second grade for 32 years. I know what those behaviors look like. I've taught for 25 years. I know what adults look like in a classroom who are misbehaving and playing Angry Birds on their computer in the back row when I'm giving a lecture at the front of the room. I
Mhm.
get it. I know what that looks like. I know what it feels like. And I know how it's tough to manage in a classroom. So, given all of that, I know that part. However, there's more that we need to be thinking about with these behaviors than just getting rid of the behaviors.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
when we just do that, I equate it with just putting a band-aid on a problem and not doing anything to treat whatever's caused the need for the band-aid.
Yep.
And when we can get to the underlying causal root cause, what I call it, the root cause, the causal factor of why these behaviors are occurring in language that parents and teachers and even children can understand, then we're making progress, I think, in creating a different narrative and understanding that there's more here than meets the eye. There's more than just the surface appearance. And if we can get to the bottom of this, there's something we can do about it. If we can figure out what we're really dealing with, we can take care of this.
Well, you get me so wound up, I'm ready to go out walking down 101 with the sign, but, I mean, what's kinda unraveling and bubbling up in me is, I remember years ago listening to different programs that say that we could really shift things in prisons, but prisons make our local states too much money, and we pay millions for somebody to run up and down a field, and I know what it takes to be a professional athlete,
Hmm.
right? It takes a lot, and
Yes.
on the small level of ASA softball All American, I know what it took 17 years. Is it worth me making 60 million? And education is one of those things that everybody goes around, we're one, oh, we're so one, and we're so that, but how do we say that until we really embrace
Hmm.
everything that's going on omni-local, everything that's going on even local, that
Hmm.
it's about, it is happening to you, it's always going to be happening to me,
Hmm.
and that connection point. And there's a woman that, her name isn't coming to me. I saw her one time. So she said, in order to measure your community, there's one question that you need to ask. And the question is, how healthy are your children? And that will tell you everything that you need to know. How healthy are your children?
Yeah.
And we are deciding, at least on this national level in the USA, we're deciding where our money's going, in
Hmm.
prisons
Yeah.
or in, like you said, a well rounded school system,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Uh, so that's the, I mean, that's where we are, is making some real major changes.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes, and I was so thankful at one point when I was still at the university. I was able to garner some funding to put a couple of stations and an elementary school as a pilot project. And I had a doc student who did her dissertation on that. It's included in the book because I just had a gut feeling that if we could get this in an elementary school, we could affect some change. And
mhm,
we were able to get halfway through the project before our infamous pandemic hit, but we had enough data that she could finish her dissertation, thankfully. And it did prove the point that when we were able to identify these children who were struggling in the classroom, some of them were having meltdowns, some of them were just misbehaving, some of them were in the principal's office all the time doing things that just weren't okay. Parents were embroiled, teachers were embroiled. There was all this stuff going on around this small segment of children, and we were able to do the assessment on those children. And one day I had one of the teachers in for the intake at the same time I had a parent. And as I started going over this assessment result, and I was seated across from that teacher, so I could kind of keep a little bit of an eye on him. And the look on his face when he realized he wasn't dealing with willful bad behavior in this child. It
mhm,
wasn't that this child was intentionally creating havoc in his classroom. When he could see the hardcore data that showed specifically what part of brain process wasn't working for this child and why the behaviors were happening the way they were in the classroom, it was like the pieces came together. He could suddenly, I watched him, he would just kind of pull back, his whole face shifted. And I was watching the parent too, and we get that response a lot from parents. But this was the first time I had a teacher sitting in the intake when we were unveiling what we had found with this child. And it was a complete game changer because now this teacher had viable information. It's
mhm.
not to disparage the assessments that schools do, but they're not doing this assessment.
No,
They're doing lots of assessments, but they're not doing this assessment.
yeah,
And this assessment takes 20 minutes. Their assessments take days, and the delay can be months before children can get assessed to determine what they may need in the classroom for supports. And there's nothing blaming anyone on that. That's just the system, the way it is right now, and it isn't working very well. And so imagine with a small investment. And I don't own this license. I don't own the license to this software. So I'm not trying to bill myself here for it. I'm just saying it
Right.
works. I've got 15 years of using this. We've used it in an elementary school. We saw what happened when we did neurofeedback with these children. And then we talked to the principal afterwards, and he goes, "This is amazing." He said, "These children aren't in my room anymore. I'm not having to deal with this." Parents are saying,
Wow.
"We're not dealing with these behavior problems anymore." The teachers are saying, "Well, this child's paying attention in school now." And it's like, yeah, they are.
I was
Welcome to
seeing on your, I didn't mean to talk on top of you, but I was seeing, I can't, for one of your testimonies says, I can't say neurofeedback treatments gave me my life back because I didn't have one.
yeah,
It instead has given me a life I never thought was possible.
yeah.
That's, that's pretty significant, right there.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I remember her. Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
That's really something. Well, I love the title of the book, and when did the book come out, Connie?
In May, this
Okay,
last May.
and
Mhm.
how's it been going?
It has opened so many doors, and that's really the goal was to start the conversations. And
Yeah,
I'm here with you today
yeah,
because it has the potential to make a difference in the world in helping to create a different narrative. And that's really what we have to do in
mhm,
this country and globally for children and adults. And I will say this applies to adults. I had a gentleman come into my clinic a few years back in his 50s, and he sat down and he said, "I'm in jeopardy of losing yet another job." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" And he said, he said, "My boss talks to me, and I think I don't remember what he tells me to do." And he said, "And then I end up losing jobs." We ran this assessment, and I came back in, and I said, "There's a reason for this." I said, "Your auditory memory doesn't work well. And here it is. Here's the data for
wow,
this section of what your brain is doing." And he started weeping
wow,
because for the first time in his life, he had an answer. And it wasn't that he wasn't smart, it wasn't that he wasn't trying, it was because he had this processing problem. And once we got that tackled, he could remember what someone was saying
my,
to him.
that's incredible. I
Mhm.
was looking for a story that I used to tell, and storytelling. Some of them never age, but I'm sure you've heard it. But it's about they did a study, and to my knowledge, it's a true story. But it was like in Boston, a suburb, and and they were assessing, the averages of the graduates and things of that nature, and they were amazed that in this one particular grade, how well all the students did. They went on to be in America, what people call successful, you know,
Mhm.
attorneys and doctors and teachers and whatnot. And they looked at, what was the common thing that happened year after year after year, and they narrowed it down to it was this one teacher.
Yes.
And when they interviewed the group, and of course, I'm just totally botching this story, but when they
Mhm.
interviewed the graduates, the people that were out in the field, it's like, well, what did she tell you?
Mhm.
She told me I was incredible, and she told me I could do anything, and
Mhm.
never to lose hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And imagine that versus what so many of these children are struggling with in some classrooms now. Again,
Hmm.
I'm teaching background, so I'm never going to diss the teacher, but I'm going to say there are different approaches in a classroom that work and some of them that don't. I had a mother come in one time and told me that the teacher was having her son sit on a one-legged stool to improve his attention.
Wow.
Hmm. There are times I'm just speechless. Some in
Yeah,
some.
like the people that get a puppy and they don't wanna potty train them.
Mhm,
I mean, come on, when you have a precious life in front of you,
mhm.
it's a real responsibility, right? I
It
mean,
Yeah, it is. And
it
there
really
are
is.
yeah, there are really good teachers out there who are very in tune with their children, like the story that you were referencing.
Mhm.
It makes a difference. We make a difference every single day when we show up and we give children encouragement. So many of these children, because the behaviors, they're viewed as responsible for their behaviors,
Yes.
regardless of their age. They're viewed as being responsible for this, which means it's willful behavior
Mhm.
and they're punished. They have restrictions. Sometimes the punishments can be a little unpleasant. Um, and still the behaviors don't change. And that's a telltale
Mhm.
sign that there's something else going on here. If you everything you're doing doesn't make a difference, then what you're doing isn't working. And we need to find
Exactly.
something else.
And
Yeah.
we've probably been there a while.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna say I'm gonna be sound a little self-righteous, but I'm gonna go as far as to say there's a difference between being childlike and being childish.
Mhm.
And, so if you're listening either now or later to this and you go, "Well, I don't really have any children," or "I don't have any children more anymore, they're at college," or, whatever. Make sure the children that you carry inside you is grown up. Just
Mhm.
because you have a big body doesn't mean you are big energetically as a human being.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the shocking things. It sounds very arrogant. I don't mean it that way, but just with sacred humility,
Mhm.
I'm surprised. I think there was a time in my life I thought, wow, I'll look forward to being in a certain age group because
Mhm.
people will be grown ups.
Mm. Mhm.
And what I know is we all have work to do. How's that? We have work to do. So
Yes.
even though you might say, "Oh, this is a nice show. I've really enjoyed it," but, I don't have children now. You have this one child that makes decision about you, whether you're a rageaholic, whether you have
Mhm.
healthy relationships, whether you keep modeling insanity or healthiness,
Mhm.
right? Or recovery or possibilities. We are all acting out or
Mhm.
acting within our
Mhm.
behavior at any given moment. And do the work. Get this book. It's very powerful, and we want you to get it because it's an investment well made, called Solving the ADHD Riddle. Yes. See, even the universe agrees with me. The sirens are going off. This is what we need now.
Right, right. It's like drawing attention here. It's like, yes, let's pay attention. Funny
Well,
play
the
on words here.
well,
With
the thing I gather from you is even if there was anything else in the world that you could do, and yes, Marilyn is asking, yes, you can find the book on Amazon. You can
yes.
also go to Connie
Mhm.
McReynolds.com and you can order the book through her website. But
Mhm.
I imagine if there's anything else in the world that you could do, you'd still be doing what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wouldn't change it for anything in the world. I retired from the university so I could really focus fully on this.
Yeah.
I found that trying to split my attention, running a graduate program and a federal grant and all the things that come with that, no longer did it for me. I'll just put it that way. That
Sure.
this running the clinic was also a part of that, which I had done for almost 15 years. And that was really where my heart was. And I thought, they always say follow your heart and go where that leads you. And that's
Oh
what I
yeah.
did. And it
Yeah.
has been a pleasure working with, oh, so many people over the years in these clinics. And now we have a bigger reach. We're able to, because of the pandemic, we actually were able to convince a software developer to kind of expand out our capability.
Wow.
And he did. So we were able to, and have now for nearly 2 years, been able to help people up and down California and sometimes beyond, depending on the need. And it's working the same as if a person could drive into the clinic, and that's what's been so beautiful about this is we really can help people where they sit and make a difference. And the beauty of this is it holds, because once we train the brain and the brain learns something, we know that it tends to stick. It's kind of called wiring. So you wire your brain
Sure.
for the things that you want for it, but and people say, well, does it stick? And it's like, well, does a bad habit stick? hmm It's like,
Sure
yeah,
does. Yeah.
it sure
Which do
does.
you want to sit? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Well,
so
Connie, give us some parting words here. And I could talk to you for hours.
I know I could too. I think
It's
it's
such
been such
a
a pleasure.
pleasure, and I'm sure, I mean, I feel that our conversations will cross again,
So
um, for sure. And thank Jackie.
I
We
will.
love Jackie Lappin. She rocks, for sure.
She
Uh,
does.
she's made a difference in the lives of so many people.
hmm
Um, what would you like to leave our group with today?
That there's hope, that we
Hmm.
don't have to live with the struggle, the frustration, even anxiety and depression. We treat trauma as well. So I've done a lot of work with veterans and getting rid of, some of the symptoms of PTSD, trauma in children as well, and anxiety. So this works. It works for seniors as well. So we're uh, doing a little bit there to help on that end of the spectrum, as well as elementary children on the other end of the spectrum. So everyone can tune up their brain, and it's painless. It doesn't require anything other than a commitment of your time, about a half an hour twice a week, to be able to make some change in your life. And we can change the narrative on all of this. And
Yeah,
I welcome further conversations around overhauling the educational system and our belief structure around ADHD.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to ask Andrea to connect with another publicist in LA and let them know about you so that they could then funnel you into their podcasters and stuff
Nice.
like that. As much as we can spread the word. Thank you, Marilyn, for saying this was informative. It was a pleasure having all of you tune in. And please share this. We're on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn, et cetera. And so please take the time to share it with people that can. I don't know anybody that couldn't benefit, but the people that come to your mind. Connie, it's been a pleasure, and much success to you in the future. I'm
Thank
sure
you
it
so
will
much.
just continue. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much.